for more on these new regulations, we are now joined by Busi Mavuso, Business Leadership South Africa CEO. Busi, good morning to you and thank you so much for joining us. Let's just start off with these new regulations. As Business Leadership South Africa, what is your take on the state of disaster being extended by another month?
Good morning, Tseho, and thank you very much for inviting me. So I think I agree with what the President is saying around ensuring that when we lift the state of disaster, we lift it responsibly. But I think we are going to have to do it as soon as possible because we seriously are sitting in an environment where lockdowns are detrimental to an already ailing economy. So as things stand, there are certain restrictions in terms of how we as employers can continue to operate, under the current state of disaster. So the state of disaster is definitely imposed, and don't get me wrong, it has been necessary for us to be able to manage the spread of the COVID pandemic, but I think it has really imposed a lot of burdens, from a cost and otherwise perspective on employers. So if we are sitting in an environment, therefore, where we are saying our main focus as the country is to try and drive, the economic recovery of the country and boost economic activity, it becomes difficult, to do so in this state of disaster environment and with some of the restrictions, which are currently in place as it were. So we definitely welcome the lifting of the state of disaster because we really think that it will boost the economy in a manner that it requires to be boosted.
Let's then move over to the issue around vaccine mandates. And, there is now the right from the employer's end to actually introduce vaccine mandates. What is your take on the situation and really the privacy for those who do not see it fit or do not want to take the COVID-19 vaccine?
Yeah. Look, we really welcome the gazetting of the Codes of Good Practice by the Minister of Employment and Labour as gazetted on Tuesday, the 15th of March, which says that all employers must now take measures to determine the vaccination status of their workers. We think this is definitely a necessary. We think that it will enable the productivity levels that have suffered for the past 2 years, in certain business sectors to definitely go back to where they used to be. So a study was done, I think in October 2021, which revealed that the reason why a lot of people are not vaccinating, it's not because they are anti-vaxxers. The majority of the people are suffering from vaccine hesitance, which is when you ask them about reasons, they will tell you issues around safety, they will tell you issues around efficacy, they will tell you issues around novelty. So it probably maybe says, we probably maybe need to increase, our levels of education around vaccine, the necessity of being vaccinated, and actually look at how do we get the 86% to be vaccinated so that we can get to a level where we reach herd immunity. And the 14% of the anti-vaxxers, we can have a different conversation about those, to try and understand what really are their reasons. It could be religious, it could be, whatever the case is. But I guess employers have been really trying to engage with this issue with their hands tied behind their backs, and it has actually been very difficult, because you have to drive profitability. You have to drive productivity. You have an obligation to ensure that you pay those employees' salaries every month. So if you are therefore going to be sitting with people who are refusing to still continue to come back to the office because they are just hesitant to vaccinate, it puts us in a very difficult position. And remember, we just came from the State of the Nation address where the President made it clear that the onus of creating jobs is on employers. So how are we therefore expected to create employment when we are operating under these tough and such restrictive conditions as it were? So the gazetting therefore gives us a little bit of leeway to say, how do we really navigate what we are confronted with as employers, and how do we start bringing people back into the office where it's necessary for us to bring people back into the office. Because some of the reasons that we're getting in terms of why people don't want to come back to the office are actually really ludicrous. People will tell you that they've moved, people will tell you that they've sold their cars, people will tell you that, and yet there was never any consultation, when they moved and when they sold their cars. The contract of employment requires them to be at the place of work, which is stipulated in their employment contract, and that would normally be the physical offices where companies are actually operating. So I think this really gives us, that opportunity, and it allows us, to be able to actually force people to come back to the office because the law requires us to do so.
There's also, of course, the issue of making COVID-19 vaccines actually compulsory for the employer to say it is now compulsory, whether or not you are hesitant to take the jab, it is now compulsory to do so, and you then have to produce your COVID-19 vaccine certificate. This, of course, a move it sounds like that you are supporting as BLSA.
We definitely are. And I think you would know that a lot of companies have already gone the mandating route. I think your discoveries, your momentum, I think some of them have actually done so without announcing it, in the public. And we have had to go the mandating route, even if the law didn't require us to do so, or even if the law didn't allow us to do so, because we could see how businesses are suffering. We could see the impact on productivity. We could see the impact broadly on economic activity. We were avoiding having to actually lay off people, which will add an extra burden to the fiscus, because then that would mean more people are going to join the unemployment queues, which is something that as the South African economy, we cannot afford. As things stand, therefore, we're sitting with 45.6% unemployment in terms of the expanded definition, where you have more people that are unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. It's a recipe for disaster. So we therefore had to go ahead with mandating, even if, the law wasn't clear on how we're going to proceed on this matter, because it was necessary. So we definitely welcome, the fact now, the fact that we will be doing this within our ambit, and I would like to think that employers are not actually going to be bullies in terms of dealing with this issue, because there are certain jobs that require you to be in the office. There are certain jobs that require you to have client interface, or some form of consumer interface. There are certain jobs that, whether you like it or not, you cannot do from home. I mean, think of the mining industry, think of the manufacturing industry, think of, as I'm saying, the client-facing industries where you are required to go into clients. For instance, auditing can still, I guess, by and large, be done virtually. But if you have to do asset verification, for instance, you're not going to be able to verify assets sitting at home. You are forced to go into the office. So there are a whole lot more companies, that have actually had to take the mandating route, not because they are trying to be bullies or they are trying to throw their weight around, but they could see, that the company and the operations are suffering with people refusing to come back to the office. So I think this puts us well on our way, to ensuring, that productivity can be at the right levels, and more importantly, it will generate the necessary economic activity to enable us, to operate at the level where we need to operate from an economic growth perspective as a country. You will remember, that we are actually going into an investment conference this week. So if South Africa is going to continue to be rigid around such things, it makes it difficult. I mean, the UK is already, operating openly, as per pre-COVID times, So how do we then expect investors to come in this environment when we are making it difficult for employers to continue to operate in this environment? So this is definitely a necessary move, not because we actually want to infringe on people's rights, but because we need to do what is right for the national good of all. We need to look and see how we can actually restore our economic activity to what it used to be pre-COVID levels, and to higher than that, because where we find ourselves at the moment demands that we pull out all stops, to ensure that we can do better as a country.
The CEO for Business Leadership South Africa, Busi Mavuso, thank you so much for your time this morning.